Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's Anax Investor Webinar. My name is Nicola Gazzatti, founder of Investor Relations Consultancy Corporate Storytime. We are very pleased to have an opportunity to run through the investment story for Anax Metals Ltd today, and joining us is Managing Director Geoff Laing. Anax is currently completing a DFS to consider a restart of the iconic Pilbara-based Wim Creek copper zinc project. Geoff will run through an investor presentation to provide an update of the Anax Metals story, and at the end of the presentation, we will run through a Q&A. If you haven't already forwarded a question, you may do so by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Geoff, who will run through the investor presentation. Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks very much, Nicola, and good morning all, and a warm welcome. Thanks for joining us for this presentation. I'll just bring up the presentation. I'll start off, run through our corporate strategy very briefly, and then launch into the details of the project, which everyone is really looking forward to getting an update. We're obviously getting very close to our definitive feasibility study. The company strategy remains primarily delivery of the Wim Creek project. We're making great strides moving ahead with that. We've also made good progress on the exploration side of things, and we've announced some results up at Evelyn. We're awaiting our gold results, and there'll be a bit more on that a little bit later. And then, of course, the discovery, looking at other projects, both regionally within the Pilbara and further afield, and a bit more on that later. So I just want to touch very briefly on the copper growth side of things, because I'm sure most people are acutely aware of the continued demand for copper and other battery metals. So being in the copper space is obviously key for us, and zinc is also a useful metal to be in. It's the green demand that is really going to charge up the demand for copper going forward in the future. And everyone keeps talking about the demand. We've obviously seen some softening more recently because of all of the headwinds in the financial markets, but certainly expecting the copper price and the copper demand to pick up in the back end of 2024 and through 2025 and onwards. What I do really want to talk about, though, in a little more detail, is the supply side challenges, because we're obviously very familiar with those now, going through the definitive feasibility study, and talk about the opportunity that this provides for us. So in simple terms, the supply side challenges get more and more, and all the more so on the back of the green revolution, because although that's driving the copper demand side of things, we're also seeing far more stringent ESG requirements. And this is putting further pressure and considerable pressure on some projects. So when you look at the supply side challenge, there's clearly a shortage of tier 1 projects in friendly areas. The ESG side of things not only is dragging out the timing to delivery on these projects, but adding significant costs to some of them. And particularly for those large, low-grade projects, the burden gets more and more. And that's what I'm referring to in the next tab there, where you see the economies of scale dilemma. Traditional thinking would have you drive up the size of the project, even at lower grades, to make it larger and larger, give you a longer mine life, and improve the economics. But all of the requirements that are being really now enforced through the, I guess, invigorated ESG process mean that you've really got two conflicting aspects working. You're trying to grow projects, but you've got all of these hurdles that you've then got to meet with all of the ESG challenges. And what we're seeing now, it's between 10 and 15 years between discovery and development of projects. And interestingly, there's probably been only 3 significant copper projects developed in Australia in the last 10 years. Just think about that, only 3 projects. That, we believe, has created an opportunity for us, because our entire strategy revolves around consolidation of existing high-grade, smaller resource assets that can be developed both rapidly and utilize centralized processing facilities. And the way that we're able to do that is using the smart technology where you can have satellite deposits producing pre-concentrates feeding into a centralized facility. And that whole process is being rolled out at Wim Creek. We have at Wim Creek a core of open pit at the mine site, open pits at the mine site, and then we've got some satellite, what will turn into underground projects. And then we will look further afield within the Pilbara region to expand that to bring in other satellite deposits. So we're not constrained, as many projects are, by this economies of scale. We're able to bolt on more and more sort of modest, higher grade VMS deposits that we see within the Pilbara. So the Wim Creek project itself, just running over the metrics again, we sit there, you can see in the map on the right, equidistant between Headland and Karratha, almost exactly 120 k's from each. We have a land package of exploration ground that's very attractive, sitting on the western border of De Grey. And we now have 11 million tonnes in JORC 2012 resources, running at 1% copper, 2% zinc, about 0.5% lead, and then some useful gold and silver credits. The project, as we've delineated, the numbers that you're seeing here are obviously from a scoping study. They're going to change in the DFS. I'm not going to dwell on the numbers too much, but to just reinforce, a very robust project underpinned by the open pit mines at Mont Capri and Wim Creek. We plan to produce 10 to 11,000 tonne a year of copper equivalent over a 5 to 7 mine life. We have a joint venture partner. We have an 80% interest in Wim Creek, and our joint venture partner, Develop, is obviously pursuing the development of the Sulphur Springs project. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute as well. Through the application of the smart technology that we're using, we expect that we'll deliver sustainable Pilbara copper, and we have Anglo American in the mix to provide funding by way of debt funding package. Discussions are ongoing with them at the moment. We include this map now because it's becoming more and more important to talk about the dominant position that we're starting to establish within the Pilbara region. So you can see there Wim Creek, you can see our resource base, 11 million tonnes, and then you can see all of the other satellite resources that could potentially be of interest in the future. And importantly, you can see to the southeast of us, the developed project, Sulphur Springs and Kangaroo Caves. They have 17 million tonnes at 1% copper and about 6% zinc. I just want to draw the comparison. So we've got 11 million tonnes at 1% copper and 2% zinc. There's obviously more zinc down at Sulphur Springs and Kangaroo Caves. But in terms of tonnage, we have a significant tonnage base. And we certainly are establishing a position where once we've built a processing hub, we believe that we'll have first mover status to be able to start looking at some of these other smaller VMS deposits that may ultimately become potential satellite feeds for us. Just want to talk about some milestones and the timing around the DFS. So this is an important month for us. It's been 2 years exactly since we completed the deal with the then VentureX, the now Develop, to acquire an 80% interest in Wim Creek. And we're very proud of what we've achieved over those 2 years. It's been an amazing 2 years. The team has worked extremely hard to deliver what we have. And most recently, the announcements on the Salt Creek resource increase and the Evelyn resource update provide some real excitement in terms of resource growth for us. We are obviously frustrated that the milestones on our DFS have slipped, the timing on that. And I'm not going to take up your time with any excuses on that. We work in extraordinary times at the moment, but I can assure you that the team are working extremely hard to deliver the best outcome as soon as possible. And I expect that we'll get that DFS out now in November. The team, we have an experienced board with a good set of skills. Our chairman, Philip Jackson, solicitor, with lots of experience both in the junior and in the larger mining sector. Peter Gordon's an engineer. He's a non-executive director. Again, lots of experience in the junior mining sector. Phil Warren, an accountant with lots of corporate experience in the junior sector. And I'm a chemical engineer with plenty of experience also in the mining sector. Our project team, who are all very focused at the moment on getting that feasibility out and also delivering some results from the exploration drilling. Andrew McDonald, manager projects, lots of experience as a resource geologist. Wendy's an exploration geologist running the project generation and exploration side of things. Dan O'Hara, our environmental manager, and Janine Owen, chief financial officer. A little bit on the capital structure, so just over 400 million shares on issue. Our market cap, 25 million. We had just over 7 million in cash at the end of June. We have some listed investments that takes our NTA up to about 8.6 and an enterprise value of just 16.5 million. JSE remain our largest shareholder. Right, so onto the project and the DFS side of things. So we're going to deliver this project in 3 phases. Phase 1, as I mentioned before, a centralized processing hub underpinned by high-grade open pits at Wim Creek and at Mon Capri. So the DFS that will be delivered in the next several weeks will be the Phase 1 DFS. That'll be followed by a Phase 2, which should come out relatively early next year, which will then contemplate the sort of immediate organic growth, as I like to call it, with the underground mines at Salt Creek and at Evelyn. And then Phase 3, which we're already working on, is potential consolidation within the Pilbara. So looking at some of those other deposits that might ultimately become satellite feeds to our processing hub. Very briefly, the Anax flow sheet. I just want to run through this again just to highlight the benefits of the flow sheet, the technology, the IP that we have. So we're decoupling the mining and the processing, and we're shrinking down the scale of processing using smart sorting technology, but keeping the mining rates relatively high. Open pit mining at Mon Capri, Wim Creek, and at Evelyn, through primary crushing and sorting, primary crushing and screening. The fines are removed and go through a jigging circuit, which will be an inline pressure jig, and we have our technology partners, Gecko, will be using one of their inline pressure jigs. Primary sorting will sort the coarser particles, and all of that material will go through a traditional concentrator to produce traditional copper, zinc, and lead concentrates. And that is the fundamental part of our business. That's what it's all about. This strategy can be used to then bring in material from satellite pits using satellite crushing and sorting to upgrade the material to pre-concentrates. And we have all of that technology now at our fingertips. We bolt onto I guess the fundamentals of our business, the potential then to bio-leach the rejects from the primary sort, which is sub-economic in a traditional concentrate. And so we get additional benefit from that. That's not included in the DFS that we'll release in the next few weeks, because that work is still ongoing. And then ultimately we'll produce barren aggregates that may be suitable for sale as aggregates. And again, that add-on value is certainly not yet included in the DFS. We're working on that at the moment. So what you're seeing here is a flow sheet that really addresses that economies of scale dilemma, because we're able to ramp up the mining while reducing the scale of the processing. And just to give you a sense of that, we're mining at 800,000 tonne per annum of concentrate, of ore, sorry, and the concentrator is a 320,000 tonne per annum concentrator. A supercharged concentrator will be fed at about 3 to 4% copper equivalent and produce anywhere between 10 and 15,000 tonne a year of copper equivalent concentrate. Jumping into the mining, here we have the critical masses at Mon Capri, 2.5 million tonnes at a little over 1% copper, 1.5% zinc, 0.5% lead. You can see here simple open pit, relatively modest strip ratios, and most importantly, you can see in a traditional VMS style deposit, all of the high grade material is at the top of the deposit. This helps make the project even more robust, because in effect, our ore sorting technology only really starts working hard when we get into the lower stringer zones, which are the lower grade material. This high grade material will, there won't be too much upgrading required as it goes through our sorting circuit. So we have the benefit of entering the high grade material in years 1 and 2. And the same is true when we go to our Wim Creek pit, which will follow on from the Mont Capri pit. And here again, you can see the high grade at the top. So we're fortunately able to get into that high grade, get the cash flow from that, and very rapid payoff of the plant and infrastructure. Then this is where it starts getting interesting. We put out the results from the hole that we put below Evelyn. Although this is a small resource at the moment, we're very encouraged by this hole, and so much so that, in fact, we'd contemplated an open pit for Evelyn. We've now commenced an underground mining study for Evelyn, because we believe that it'll be better suited to an underground mine rather than a high strip open pit. And every expectation that this resource will continue down depth, and obviously we'll start planning some more drilling at depth to extend this resource a bit further. Just to give you a sense, we're only down 170 meters vertically at this hole, so still plenty of potential to keep going from surface drilling. Moving on to Salt Creek, we put out an upgraded resource here. We significantly increased the copper tonnage in the resource and the zinc tonnage in the resource. This was simply a matter of updating the resource. The previous resource was a very patchy resource, and we found that the resource is actually a lot more continuous than we had expected. And the upshot of that is that we had originally anticipated an open pit at Salt Creek, a very high strip open pit. We will no longer consider that. It'll simply be an underground mine, and we're currently looking into commencing a detailed underground mining study for Salt Creek. So effectively what you've got now is a project that's got a robust open pit, critical mass, and then you've got 2 satellite undergrounds, both open at depth, lots of upside potential from both of those. So here you can see the model of the 3-dimensional model of the ore sorting plant, and I'll just play here. You can actually see our material going through an ore sorter, commercial ore sorter. This is a Steiner sorter, and you can see the material being shot off. So these are the high-grade sulfides are being ejected. They get sensed. I'll just run this again. They get sensed back on the belt, and then pneumatic ejectors eject the high-grade sulfides. They report to one side of a wear plate, and then all the low-grade material drops down. We've anticipated a 2-stage sorting process. You've got dual sorters in the primary sort, and then a second stage sorter, which will pluck out all the material that will ultimately go to the heap leach. Very robust belts and braces. This has been designed along with our technology partners, Nexus Bonham, who have considerable experience now in the ore sorting business. Down to the modular plant. Gecko Systems in Ballarat have designed this modular plant for us. It's a 320,000 tonne per annum plant, as I had indicated previously. It is pretty much all modular other than the mill. The modules will be built off-site and then dropped in and put together pretty much as a Meccano set. This has the advantage of not having to have a big erection crew on site, and we're able to actually build most of these modules in a factory and then ship them to site. This obviously has big economic benefits when you're considering the cost of labour and maintaining a big workforce up in the Pilbara region. This plant has now been completely designed, and we have all the costings for it. And this will obviously be included in the definitive feasibility study. While I'm on the slide, I do want to just mention that another benefit that we have is the tailings that we produce. And just remember, we'll more than halve the volume of material that we actually mine that will ultimately go through the concentrator. So the volume of material that actually goes to the tailings dam is only half of the ore that we actually mine. The tailings will be pumped to the Mont Capri pit. So we'll mine the Mont Capri pit first. There's two sides to that pit. The northwest pit will be mined and then used as a tailings facility as we mine the rest of the pit. And then the tailings will go into the remaining of the Mont Capri pit. And that is by far the best outcome. The department prefers to see in-pit tailings to any other tailings disposal. Here you can see some pictures of the very high-grade, massive sulfide material that we have intersected at Evelyn. Again, I'm not going to dwell on these numbers other than to say these are the scoping study numbers for the project. Just to remind people that there will be two phases to the DFS, as we had with the scoping study. The initial phase with the underground, with the open pits, and then the next phase, including the undergrounds. Just harping on again about the ESG side of things and wanting to talk about our carbon footprint. So this particle sorting technology allows us to reduce the power by 50%, the tailings by 50%, dramatic reduction to the chemical usage. All of these things go a long way to improving our carbon footprint and obviously our environmental benefit. In addition to that, we have deposits that are relatively high grade. So if you think that the average grade of copper being mined at the moment is about 0.6%, we'll be feeding our concentrator at about 4% copper equivalent. So multiples above the average grade. And that has all the knock-on effects in terms of carbon footprint per pound, environmental footprint per pound, of essentially having a feed grade of 6 to 7 times the global average. So the milestones, I've mentioned that the definitive feasibility study will now be released in November. The critical path will be the approvals. So we have submitted both a works approval and a mining proposal, and we're hopeful that we'll get those approved in Q1 next year. So they become the critical path. So we expect to be able to have a final investment decision in Q1 next year that would see us go through the construction and ramp up phase through to the end of 2023 and into production in early 2024. In terms of the, I guess, market conditions, we're expecting that we'll see somewhat of a slowdown in the pace of things up in the Pilbara through that period, which should mean that there is a somewhat better access to labour and equipment up there towards the second half of next year. All things being equal. On the exploration side, we completed our first round of exploration drilling a couple of months ago. Part of that was the drilling at Evelyn. We've obviously released the results of that hole. We're awaiting results on the gold drilling at the heap leach HLF prospect. And then we're also awaiting and processing results from the extension drilling that we did at Wind Creek and at Mont Capri. So looking forward to updating the market with those results as soon as we've got them released and processed. We continue to look at the prospectivity, and we're aiming to get heritage clearance on this PGM prospect down here. Again, all things being equal, we would aim to do some more drilling on some of these prospects, maybe early next year, depending on the cyclone season and how well that treats us. So finally, just to close off again on approvals, we've now completed all of the key elements that were required for the environmental protection notice. And as I've mentioned, we've submitted the relevant works approval to Department of Environment and mining proposal to DMIRS, and we await the completion of those, which will effectively allow us to relicense the site to get back into production. So just to finish off, once again, we're aiming to deliver a processing hub within the central Pilbara region that will deliver 10, in fact, it'll be capable of delivering more than 10 to 11,000 tonnes per annum of copper equivalent. It'll be a low capex upfront development. We have Anglo already interested in providing the debt funding subject to the outcomes of the feasibility study. As I mentioned, we are looking at other immediate growth opportunities, and we're excited about what we might be able to do with the underground mines now at Evelyn and Salt Creek. We continue to explore, look forward to getting some results out on that, and then we are looking at other projects both regionally and further afield. So thank you very much for your time, and again, we look forward to providing the definitive feasibility study as soon as possible in November.
Thanks so much for the update, Geoff, and we'll now move on to our Q&A section for today. Our first question is, Anax's JV partner, Develop Global, has significant capabilities in underground mining. How do you envisage this may potentially assist in an underground development of Wim Creek?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have obviously already started talking about that, and we're all the more excited about what we're seeing at Salt Creek and Evelyn, having the potential opportunity to work with developers as underground contractors, looking at those projects. It's still early days, and so we will certainly engage more fully with them over coming months to see what could be done there. But these are small satellite, relatively small satellite undergrounds that I think would fit right in the sweet spot for the develop contracting business. And I would just like to extend that thought process just a little bit further. We've now become specialists in the surface operations, if you like. We, particularly with the particle sorting, producing the pre-concentrates. And so when you look at the potential of consolidation within the Pilbara, there's an interesting mix of skills with specialist underground miners and then specialist surface operators that are able to potentially deliver enhanced outcomes for these satellite deposits, VMS type deposits that could all come together, servicing a central processing hub.
Thanks for that comprehensive answer there, Geoff. So the next question that we have, is there potential for down dip extensions to the Wim Creek or Moncapri deposits?
More likely strike extensions, and that for both of those, we are some of the drilling that we did a couple of months ago will provide us a little bit more insight into that. Having said that, at Wim Creek, we are looking at whether there's a sort of a parallel lens that might sit below the current resource. For Moncapri, we're fairly sure that resource was truncated by a fault. And so the challenge now is to find out where the truncated portion is. But there's still potential for strike extensions, and particularly between Moncapri and Moncapri's northwest.
Thanks, Geoff. Our next question, in relation to the potential debt funding from Anglo American, what are the triggers to make this debt available, and what does Anax expect to be able to draw on that funding?
The funding is contingent on the outcomes of the feasibility study. So that will be the fundamental platform that Anglo will obviously want to run the ruler over. The time critical aspect will be the approval. So I expect that the process will be for them to assess, do the due diligence on the DFS, and then they'll obviously want to be very confident that those approvals are either in place or about to be put in place. So I think the final sign-off would be subject to those approvals being bedded down. And Anglo have offered 20 million US in essentially vanilla debt funding, and we'll certainly look to see whether they are prepared to extend that to a larger number, subject to the outcome of the feasibility study.
Thank you. You mentioned the concept of Wim Creek becoming a regional production hub. What sort of dialogue is Anax having with other Pilbara-based junior mining companies?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. As you saw on that map, there are a number of companies that have assets in the Pilbara region within sort of 150 kilometre radius of us. And the VMS deposits that we're seeing are all typically of modest size and sort of reasonable grades. So all of them could potentially become sources of feed to a centralized processing hub. And we have commenced discussions with a number of those people. Obviously, can't go into any details on them, but we've certainly commenced discussions with 2 or 3 of the companies that have the most relevant assets that we're interested in.
Okay, and our last question is, do you believe that the unique technological solutions Anax is planning at Wim Creek could be applied to other projects in Australia or overseas, or are these solutions tailor-made for Wim Creek?
I'm absolutely certain that these smarts can be applied to other projects, both here in Australia, and of course we're running the ruler over other projects in Australia and overseas. And I think that as we get more and more information out, it'll become clearer to people that the opportunity to consolidate, bring together some of these smaller assets, put them through a processing hub or production hub, is the most relevant way to go, and provides a fantastic opportunity in certain places. So simple answer is, it doesn't only apply to Wim Creek, and we're certainly having a good look both within Australia and we'll start looking further afield as soon as we have some time to do that.
Well, Geoff, that appears to cover the majority of our questions from our audience today. So we wish to thank you and the Anax team for the update. We will make a recording of the webinar available via Anax Metals and Corporate Storytime's digital media accounts in the coming days. But if you do have any further questions for Geoff, please forward them to info@corporatestorytime.com. And thanks everyone for your time and attending today. Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks, Nicola, and thanks to all.